What's up, guys? This is Werther. So today I wanted to talk about a topic which has been done to death in the Jiu-Jitsu world, but I wanted to go ahead and give my thoughts on it. So, gi versus no gi. Which one is better to train specifically for self-defense? So before I give my opinion on which one is better, I want to give you guys basically an idea of how I scale this question in relation to other questions, okay? Does it matter in comparison to whether you should be training takedowns or whether you should be training with firearms or whether you should also be training with striking? And my answer to that is no. Those are far more important questions. So before you answer the question of whether you should be training gi versus no gi, do you train firearms? Do you also train striking? Do you train takedowns with your jiu-jitsu, right? So whether you do, if you do gi, do you practice your judo? If you do no gi, do you practice your wrestling? Those are things you should be asking yourself first, because those questions are far more important. Now, that being said, in terms of gi versus no gi, which one is better in self-defense? Ultimately, it depends. I know, fence-sitting answer, but it really does. Think about the climate in which you normally operate in. I live in Florida. Most people here, year-round, they wear t-shirts and shorts. So, in my opinion, in Florida, no gi is a far more appropriate option to train for self-defense because it more closely reflects the realities that you'll deal with. I mean, a lot of people here, when they get into fights, sometimes they'll take their shirts off. So you have to be able to deal with grabbing someone that may be sweating, that may be slippery, and pinning them without having to rely on grips. Now, if you live in a colder climate, if you live up north, the gi is going to more closely resemble what is available for you to grab and do in a self-defense situation. You're going to be able to grab your opponent's clothes. They're going to be able to grab yours, and you need to be able to deal with that. So for that reason, you should ultimately train both, in my opinion, although you can bias yourself towards the one that makes the most sense for the climate that you're in. I trained gi and no-gi jiu-jitsu about 50% of the time until I got my purple belt, and then I shifted to basically exclusively no-gi training because that is the route I decided to go to when I was competing, and ultimately the route that I go now with the school that I have. So I do no-gi about 80% of the time. I do gi about 20% of the time. If you live in a northern climate, it's completely reasonable for you guys to do gi 80% of the time and no gi 20% of the time. And guess what? If it's vice versa in a warm versus cold climate, it ultimately doesn't matter, okay? If you train gi in Florida and you do regular judo takedowns as part of your curriculum and you regularly train the stand-up grappling, you are way more prepared for a self-defense situation than someone that exclusively trains no-gi but only trains their guard and never works being on top and never works actually going for takedowns. So again, guys, those are more important questions. Now, the last point that I'll leave you with is one that I definitely did not come up with myself. I thought John Donner had a really good take on the advantages to both gi and no-gi training, and this is why I believe someone that is training jiu-jitsu should train in both, even if it's not a complete 50-50 split. They should train in both. In no-gi, there is a sweat factor. People are a lot more slippery. People can be a lot more explosive because people aren't grabbing at your clothing and they're not holding on to, grips to stall your movements. So it's necessary to learn how to deal with that in a situation like that. And because of the slipperiness and the sweat factor and people's ability to explode out of things, your offense and your pressure on top in no-gi needs to be significantly more tight than it needs to be in the gi, because the gi has a lot more friction. Sometimes you can get away with a little bit less pressure, a little bit, of space when it comes to grabbing and finishing a joint lock or a choke. In no-gi, it's not the case. You need to be extremely tight with your pressure. Now, the opposite is true too. In no-gi, you can get away with a lot of explosive, athletic, defensive reactions and do it successfully, whereas in the gi, that is not going to fly because there's a lot more friction in the gi. It's much easier for people to hold you down and stop you from slipping a limb out if you're trying to escape a submission or you're trying to escape a position. So, gi training is very beneficial for learning technical defense that will work consistently in every situation. No-gi is better for developing a very tight offensive pressure-based game. So again, guys, there's advantages to both, but ultimately I think the question is not that important, okay, compared to the question of Are you training takedowns? Are you getting proficient in firearms training? Are you learning striking, right? You should be doing all of those things, and you should be thinking about those things first before you start debating with someone online about whether gi versus no gi is better. Anyway, guys, that's my video. If you guys disagree, which I'm sure many of you will, and that's okay, please leave a comment. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.